I'm Jonathan Greene, and I'm technically a Timothy Roberts cymbal artist.
Ooh, yeah, man. Love it.
We're going to go ahead and do that. Dude, I love this. This is... You're right, but the thing that the Big and Uglies that I had didn't have is weight. They didn't have the feeling solid, right?
Yeah.
You know, if you remember the Big and Ugly King, that was so high profile, super dry.
Yeah,
And super thin. So there was that type of thing. And so if you wanted something to sound chunky, it just didn't happen. So there wasn't a let's go that type of feeling.
You couldn't drive with it.
Right.
Yeah, that's always the hardest thing with cymbals is that balance between you want the thickness level to give you activation, but you don't want it to sound thin and lack body and sound kind of tinny. And so you want depth and kind of meat, which comes from the weight a lot of times. But you also want to be able to activate low volumes and dig in and have it not break apart on you. You know, so I mean there's always I say this all the time, there's always a compromise.
So how much weight can you put into a cymbal before you start to get that clangy metallic character?
I mean, this cymbal right here is it's a 22 inch, a little over 22, and it's under 2,500 grams. So we're in a medium thin range.
So, it's different category than this guy.
Yes. This one, I mean, I think relatively, this is what kind of interesting. Relatively, they're about the same weight. If this 24 was a 22, they'd relatively be about the same, but this has a different shape, and it does not have an extreme taper.
Right.
This one has a really extreme taper.
So it's going to be a little bit more explosive.
More explosive, quick. You know, it'll activate quick, but it also breaks apart quicker on the upper end of the volume levels. When you're really digging in, you're going to have this kind of, the wash is going to build and kind of meet the level of the stick or overshadow it. Whereas this one, I mean, you could hit the stick as hard as you want, be up here, and that wash is always going to be controlled and contained underneath.
Which is what now back to the Big and Uglies, so that sort of thing, which is cool because I play in a lot of contained, quiet situations.
Right. And I find too that this cymbal, we play it in this room. What I feel and hear from it is it's I look for more air in my cymbals, but what I've learned from you, especially when you were playing those Big and Uglies, and I would go see you at the Whiskey Box, in that space, that bone dry cymbal had air. It was like this room isn't going to show the air that this cymbal has, and it actually does have air that just needs a certain context to come out.
Right. Because, like, you know, somebody is about where that camera is whenever you're, you know, playing to them. And, you know, there are so many other frequencies, guitar frequencies, upright bass frequencies that sort of live that type of woody sound.
Yes.
You know? And you don't want to get in the way of that stuff all the time. Just have this blanket of sound just everywhere. One thing I do like about this cymbal, that I really want to take it, and it's something that I realized after like playing some of these cymbals and giving you my feedback, I think my main ride has to be 22.
Oh, really? Not 24. Ooh.
Like,
this is big news. This is breaking news.
I know, right? It's just that it's just a sweet spot.
Yeah.
I played this for a while. This was set up at home for a while.
Yeah.
I still love the other cymbal that I have, and that 24 I feel like is magic.
Yeah.
You know, that because it does have air, and it's very different than this.
Yeah.
Because it has more air and it's not the same type of character.
Right.
And I think I get complimented on that cymbal now a lot. But as a compliment to this cymbal, something to be focused and something to be dry and something to be articulate.
And just a bell that will cut through anything.
Right. This cymbal here makes that cymbal make a lot more sense and a context. Like this one did because it was heavy, but it was hard to tame because as soon as you got like one of my former students told me that like playing it here, like it sounds kind of like the same character as all the rest of them. And as soon as you start, then then the monster comes out, right? And so as long as I kept my stick height at the level where I wanted that type of sound, that was fine.
Yeah.
But cool. But what happens like when you start to get excited and like there's just no room for error with these tones. As soon as things start to happen, it's like, okay, you're being a monster.
Yeah.
And I didn't and I just didn't feel like that there was a middle ground to sort of live in with this one.
It's so interesting because I just had a conversation with Jeff Clapp, who was over here. And Jeff, he wants the monster.
He would love this cymbal.
He would love that cymbal. Yeah, he wants the monster, but with him there's like a different way of maybe it's a different approach or whatever. But where there are cymbals that you could just play the way you play, and then there are cymbals you have to play it a certain way. You know what I mean? And so it's just kind of like it is like drummer specific as to what you're going for. Like your stuff is a lot about I've if I could be so bold as to judge your intent with music. You are very interactive with the other musicians, and there's a lot of intricacies involved in the music you play. And so if you're having to also take into account this other cymbal that is supposed to be a main ride, that you're like, okay, well, I got to think about how to actually play this thing.
Yep.
Then you're going to it's like an extra level that you don't want to have involved in the way that an extra thing to think about that you don't want to have to think about. But that being said, you also are at times, I'm sure, wanting something a little bit more airy to go to that's going to open up in certain ways. Right. So it really comes down to like the player specific and what your intent is and what you're trying to say creatively.
I think that oftentimes like people get so like I have friends of mine that are like, oh, this has character, or I like this color. And for me, I feel like I'm such a pragmatist when it comes to my sounds. Like I just want something that works.
Right.
I want something that will do what I expect it to and not get in the way.
Yes.
Right. And so that's that's how all of my musical choices, as far as sound go, I feel like I'm the complete opposite with what I practice. But
which is probably a good thing because you're practicing the thing that you don't. I know it's always good to practice the thing you don't necessarily gravitate towards or excel at. So you're shoring up the other area, right?
Yeah, but it's almost like, so what is the idea? Is the idea the timbre or the sound? And you can look at certain drummers, even in like our space in sort of the modern Instagram social media space, where they sort of lean towards, I'm going to paint with colors, and part of my vibe is really just like calling attention to specific colors, and that is a part of my expressive vocabulary.
Right.
While others are like, I'm going to focus on ideas.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that there isn't bleed over, because obviously there is.
Right.
But I think that the degree there's a big spectrum in between how much you like that's a cool sound versus you played a cool thing.
Yes. Yeah. It's not a binary, like you're saying. Like, it's not that you only care about ideas and maybe Jeff only cares about colors. There is a spectrum, and I say it all the time. I say the word spectrum all the time when I talk about cymbals, because I look at this, maybe this broad binary of interesting, complex sounds and then versatile sounds. And at the extremes, both of them are uninteresting to me, because the uber complex, interesting is unusable in musical situations at the extreme. And then the extreme at the functional side is like a hubcap, for certain things. So it's like we always want to try to find where we land it within the middle of that spectrum, which I think is like the intent with this foundation series is finding something that's a little bit more direct of a statement without also sacrificing color. Because I feel like my big gripe with the Big and Uglies was a lack of dimension or depth of sound, or having like a direct cymbal that makes a direct statement, but it also has other stuff that makes it interesting to play. It's not necessarily. So we're trying to find this very interesting balance, and we have like a version 1 foundation and kind of a version 2 foundation. And what we're landing on is okay, can we somehow merge both of these? Because that would be sort of the ideal.
Absolutely. Because you have like no forgiveness, but then you have almost like an infinitely forgiving sound here,
right.
Where it's just, but that infinite forgiving sound is the one-dimensional part.
Yes. Yes.
Where it's like, okay.
Right.
At all dynamics, everything is very similar. That's
yes.
why I really like that one. Is definitely more along the lines of just having color. I don't know, like I like how it how it also has a bell though.
Yeah.
That's one thing, because like I don't know, when we're talking about timbres, I think we've specifically been talking about the way that velocity influences the dynamics and the reactions of the cymbal.
Yes. Yeah.
But like having a bell that makes sense, having a bell that you actually want to play,
yeah,
like allows for that type of dimensionality too. So.
And I've been kind of coming to a new level of thinking or acknowledging just how much these instruments do change, especially when they're handmade. And I've been trying so hard for years to create cymbals that have been taken all the way to the finish line, 100%. They're done. They're not going to change, other than like in 30 years they'll change. But what I've realized is all the people that come back to me and talk about the cymbals they bought last year or 2 years or 3 years or 4 years ago, when they tell me about that cymbal, they'll tell me about how it's changed. And so it makes me realize a lot of times too, it changes in a way, a lot of times it depends on a lot of things, but a lot of times the wild cymbals will become tame over time. And, the tame cymbals might just become boring over time, right? If the cymbal is if this cymbal is too controlled now, it might stay that controlled or even get more controlled later. So it's kind of like allowing in a little bit more air and knowing that in 5-10 years, the cymbal's going to kind of change in a way. And it's also dependent on how much it's played, how much it's activated, how many vibrations are going through it.
Yeah.
If it sits in a closet for a year, then it's going to be stiff, It's been at the forefront of my mind thinking about how to verbalize, what this instrument's going to do after you purchase it,
right.
Or like what you can expect. And a lot of times I'm realizing that the cymbals that turn out to be the ones that have stayed with me for a decade or longer are the cymbals I wasn't 100% sold on when I first played them.
Yeah.
Or like I bought it, I got it, and I hit it, and I'm like, yeah, it's nice, but I don't really know. And then I start taking it to the gigs, and then and conversely, the cymbals that I get and I hit it, and on first hit, I'm like, this is the most amazing sound I've ever heard in my life. I'm never going to play another cymbal ever. That cymbal becomes the cymbal I sell in 3 months because it's not what it's probably a little bit too funky, has too much character to work on the gig. So
And maybe I'm the opposite with this guy and how clean and just how solid it sounds, because I've been wanting that sound for a while. I already just don't want that to change, because like that's just it. It's like, oh, this is going to be the thing, and then what, in a month, 2 months, 3 months, I'm like, I wish this thing had a little bit more sustain.
Right. Which that was kind of this one. This one had a mod. We did a mod on this one. It had more weight to it, and I came back in and I think I took off another couple 100 grams to get it to crash more. But then obviously it rested, and now it's a wild child. So this is kind of a little insight into the development of this series. I've been telling everybody that the Foundation series is coming, and I put out a Foundation ride every now and then, kind of put it out, and they're just kind of like the pre-launch prototypes. But
Sure.
we're in the process of kind of dialing in this whole thing, and I'm excited that you're helping me do it, and just
Hey,
because you're one of the most working drummers I know, and you're in so many different environments, and I'm just the guy that likes airy cymbals all the time, and I'm growing into being a little bit more holistic with how I view these instruments, and realizing that if you're going to play a wedding gig, you need a bell like that.
Right.
You don't need something that's kind of integrated and airy and crazy,
But even listening to some old jazz records, when did that start? Because I listen to some stuff and it sounds like a chunk. It feels solid. It doesn't feel floaty and airy. When Mike Clark came through for the master class, remember he was talking about that solid stick sound, and this is not playing at it, but just getting those. And it was that stuck with me for such a long time. It's that's so true.
Yes.
There are so many drummers that sort of do this sort of dainty kind of dance.
Yeah.
And he just comes from a different era where it's
just
this is it right here.
Right.
And
you just said it. You've stepped in it a little bit, because I'm learning. I've learned that I was wrong about cymbals. A couple of years ago, I had this big moment of realizing I hit a wall. I was like, I am wrong about this. Because if you listen to Tony, if you listen to Elvin, if you listen to Higgins, all that stuff in the 60s and earlier, they're not playing airy cymbals. They're playing bright, thick, cymbals that have a lot of body that they can dig into. Us drummers are listening to the recording with all of the recording technology of the day, and it was maybe mic'd, it might have been mic'd out front, and the cymbal was carrying 10 feet before it even hit the mic, and so we're hearing this sound that to us, obviously we're hearing the player, that's probably first, we're hearing the skill of the player, but we're also hearing this sound that is translating to us as light and airy. But in the room, when you're sitting behind that cymbal, it's not.
Right.
And so that's where I'm coming to. All of my cymbals have gotten heavier. I still put out thin cymbals, but I've increased the weights about 100 to 200 to 300 grams on average from where I was 3 years ago. And that's something we all need to learn, because we're all just playing the cymbal behind. Not a lot of us makers are actually out gigging a lot. To be able to have that feedback from the bass player or the sax player to say hey, that cymbal's kind of getting lost under my solo. What can we do something about that? But we're which gets into drum room cymbals versus gig cymbals, because we like to hear that nice airy, dancey kind of thing when we're sitting behind the kit. But it's always just perspective and knowing how stuff translates. So that's where the Foundation series, the intent behind it is really solid, beefy cymbals that get the job done with just enough color and intrigue to make them just a delight to play. That's my ultimate goal with it. And obviously working with you to get there has been awesome. So,
I appreciate that.
yeah.
I also appreciate that you've been sort of treating this like an interview, and I've just been talking.
Yeah, I know, right? I kind of morphed it into...
It's oh, now we're talking about this ride cymbal and this Foundation thing, and I don't think that I've hit this guy.
Let's do an in-person live reaction.
See what I mean? Obviously it doesn't give as much as a crash does, but I feel like the feeling of the way that the energy is sort of evenly dispersed feels like a crash.
Yes, yeah. And it's also more on the bright spectrum than the dark spectrum, I would say. It's dry.
It is dry.
But if you it's 20 and a half, and that's
Okay.
21.
Okay.
So, I mean, if you hit those next to each other, you hear totally different vibes.
Yeah, I mean, so when I mean to say like it doesn't sound finished, it feels like the metallic thing is sort of forward.
Yes.
And knowing you, that's not the goal.
Never. Never. Which, I mean, it would make sense. I lathed that cymbal and hammered it like an hour ago. So,
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
yeah.
Do you have anything that's been like sitting for longer than like today?
Well, that one has been sitting for about a week, which is why it has like the most air to it, you know? I mean, in a week that'll be there. But yeah, there's about like 5 or 10 more that have been hammered. But this kind of represents all the ones I've shown you. It kind of represent different avenues to go in, different ways. I mean, this one not really. So maybe more like these two.
Yeah.
You know, because like this one, you can see everything's more, like even the hammering on the bells is more dense. All of this is more densely hammered. This is bigger and more forceful hammering, but more spread apart.
So just so the cameras can see,
Yeah.
how did this happen? Like, how does this darkness happen?
Yeah, so I got this blank. I asked for it without the salt wash, which is like an additional layer of oxide crust on top of just a normal, you know, a normal oxide crust looks like this.
Okay.
A little bit more of a light brown. This black color is like almost like an extra layer. So
Because I'm in love with the way this looks.
yeah, that is such a vibe, I think, and it really does help. Really helps contain spread and give you that smoky, dry thing.
Honestly, as far as I the symbol I want to take is this one.
Yeah.
But I feel like this you can do this again. And
Yeah.
this one is the one that needs a little bit more feedback.
Right,
So
right.
this one can go to a home.
Release him.
The symbol sounds done.
Yeah.
though.
Oh yeah, it's done. There's not another step. All right.
You see what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. That's it. Guys, thank you guys for watching this half interview, half, I don't know what.
Something.
Something. Yeah, we'll catch you guys next time.